Thank you. For those of you who joined us after the breakfast, my name is Tom Lindsay. I direct the Center for Higher Education here at the Texas Public Policy Foundation, on behalf of which I want to thank all of you for attending this important conference. Our second panel asks the question of how to create more Western civilization programs. We have on this issue some victories and some defeats. You just heard Professor Paquette, who courageously fought to establish the Alexander Hamilton Institute, which, as he mentioned, originally was the Alexander Hamilton Center. Why? What's the difference? The difference is the center would be a part of the college. Now remember, the Alexander Hamilton Institute, right, at Hamilton College, because of the faculty uproar, as Professor Paquette told us, the university, surprise, surprise, breached the contract, and fortunately, some thoughtful, courageous donors helped to fund the independent Alexander Hamilton Institute. And we're all glad that Hamilton College lost the money that would have come with that. A number of you are asking me this morning about another of the failures, of our failures, which has to do with me. From 2008 to 2010, I was president of a small liberal arts college that I tried to reform, and for which I had my head handed to me by the very board that asked me to reform the college. Specifically, two things that bear on Western civilization. I rewrote the mission statement, and the first premise of the mission statement was that liberal education is about the pursuit of truth. The second thing I put in the new mission statement for approval by the board was the required study of the Declaration and the Constitution. The faculty unanimously opposed my revision of the new mission statement, and it passed by one vote, but because of pressure, which included protests, harassment, physical intimidation of my board members, 6 weeks later, I was gone. So there have been some successes and some failures, but fortunately, our panelists have been more successful because they're much better at this than I was, and they're going to talk about some of the positive news about the developments in the creation of Western civilization programs. We'll go in this order. We'll begin with Professor Peter Wood, followed by John Hardin, followed by Rich Vedder, followed by Mario Diaz Villarreal. Let me give you a little introduction to each of them before they come up. Dr. Wood is the president of the National Association of Scholars. He's the author of A Bee in the Mouth, Anger in America Now, and Diversity, the Invention of a Concept. He has, for his sins, had to serve as a university administrator, as I did prior to this, where he was provost at King's College in New York City. I've known him for a long time, and he's a very courageous warrior in this very important battle. Dr. John Hardin is the Director of University Relations at the Charles Koch Foundation. He's a key spokesperson for the foundation and manages relationships with partner universities, organizations, and donors to support programs that advance the ideas of a free society. He earned his BS in civil engineering from the Citadel. He also earned a master's degree in theological studies from Duke, and his PhD is in U.S. history from the University of Maryland. Dr. Richard Vedder is Distinguished Professor of Economics at Ohio University, and he's also the director of the Center for College Affordability and Productivity, as well as being an adjunct scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. He's written widely on American economic history. And last, but by no means least, Dr. Mario Villarreal is an associate professor and associate director at the Center for the Philosophy of Freedom at the University of Arizona. Before joining the Freedom Center, he was the economics program officer at the Institute for Humane Studies at George Mason University, and he's an affiliated scholar at the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. Please join me in welcoming our panelists. We'll begin with Dr. Wood. Peter?
Like any good academic, I'm going to start by evading the question. 3 months behind in rent, orphaned, unemployed, and with no prospects, Apu takes down from his bookshelf lovingly his only two possessions, the shorter Oxford English Dictionary and H.G. Wells' Outline of World History, sadly puts them into a bag and heads out to sell his only 2 books. This is the 1950s. Apu is the lead character in a Bengali trilogy of movies, the Apu trilogy, made by the Bengali filmmaker Sanjit Ray. It tells the story of a Brahmin boy, Apu, who's the son of an impoverished scholar. We see Apu's childhood in a rural village, no electricity, no plumbing, that sort of thing. His adolescence, when he, as a precocious student, achieves a university education, and his life as a young man of literary ambitions. The Apu trilogy, which you may not be familiar with, is considered the glory of Indian cinema, and it is regarded by a great many as one of the greatest accomplishments of cinema worldwide. The first part of the trilogy was made for $6,000, and it's just an outstandingly beautiful film. Consider that against the latest $300 million Avengers strategy. No. It's a beautiful story, not least because it's told as a story, and it gives no thought at all to describing a world in social scientific terms. Just because of that, it's also a successful ethnography. It puts us in the British colonial India of the 1920s and 30s, but there's no glimpse at all of colonial officials or other representatives of Western civilization. Nonetheless, we see Apu as a young child studying his English ABCs by his father's side, Apu at school learning English recitation, and when he has grown to manhood, he's fiercely determined to do one thing, which is to write a novel that will change the world. His models are Dickens, Yeats, poet, Lawrence, Dostoevsky. They are his lodestars. And his book, what it is to be, it's a semi-autobiography about a man who stays poor but wants to live. Now, this is no doubt an indirect way into the subject, but it's a good way. I'm an anthropologist, and when I think about Western civilization, much of what I think about is the contrast to the non-West, and the Apu trilogy is a wonderful window onto that. For what Western civilization means to Apu is freedom. And freedom, of course, is a complicated thing. Apu was raised to be a Brahmin priest. He rejects that path to aspire instead to become, well, to become what? To become a novelist in the Western manner, but something more than that. He's not out to cease being a Bengali or a Brahmin. He is, as we've learned to say, caught in the complexities of multiculturalism. The West and the East are not an either-or for him, and they're not quite a both-and either. He's not alienated from his own world so much as he is suddenly aware of larger horizons. And while the 3 movies are filled with loss and death and incredible sadness, Apu is a figure of sheer joy. Universities today are about as far from that emotion as possible. They are places not of joyful discovery, but of carefully deployed anger and resentment. The emblematic college student of our times is Emma Sulkowicz, aka Mattress Girl at Columbia University, who accused a fellow student years later of having raped her. He's suing the university and no doubt will get a multi-million-dollar settlement. We could pick other candidates for this role of representative figure, but almost all of them would be accusers of some sort, vengeful furies pursuing the arrestees of, well, what? Patriarchy, carbon fuels, hands up, don't shoot. This is the world that Western civilization has devolved to in the institution that is primarily created to replenish and help it persist. Now, Steve Balch spent many years as the president of the National Association of Scholars trying to build campus centers for the study of Western civilization. I've spent a few years taking it apart. It was a praiseworthy goal, but probably fair to say that the cumulative weight of the centers that he created, and now one of which he heads, is something like a feather on a stack of elephants. The work to create these centers of Western civilization, I regard as highly praiseworthy, But Emma Sulkowicz refutes the premise. It's not working. It hasn't worked. Why hasn't it worked? Well, the simplest and clearest answer to that, I suppose, is just money, that creating these things takes a lot of money. Even the most successful one in the country, Robbie George's Madison program at Princeton, is heavily funded from outside, but it's wholly dependent on Robbie George. When he goes, Princeton will wipe the slate clean and there will be no meaningful Madison program again. So the challenge for this is not to come up with an original idea. Is it a good thing to have centers for Western civilization on college campuses? It absolutely is. But having them there underfunded and left to languish in the twilight days of a tenured professor, and only to be erased when that professor retires, doesn't seem to be much of a recipe for restoring Western civilization. We're in an age of callow showmanship on campus, carrying the mattress around for a year, performative anger, as I've called it, and intellectual shallowness. You don't defeat that by establishing a program here or there that tries to keep in circulation ideas that are regarded by most of the faculty in the humanities and social sciences as discredited or worse, discreditable. Western civilization has just gone belly up on campus. So what is to be done? Well, I mentioned I've taken the National Association of Scholars out of the business of creating these centers. Well, partly that's because a competitor arose that does the job much better and is better funded. That's the Jack Miller Center, and when the Jack Miller Center came into existence, Steve handed it to them, the 30 or so centers that we had founded, and those centers are better off for that. The Manhattan Institute was also in the business of creating these centers, and they did the same thing. So the place to go if you're looking for someone who is now actively creating these centers around the country is the Jack Miller Center based in Philadelphia. Of course, another good place to go, since we're in Texas, is to Steve Balch, who is single-handedly leading the effort to be the Johnny Appleseed of these centers here. But I repeat, you can't just establish them. They have to be established in a manner in which they become institutionalized. They do what they do, and these centers clearly help the students that they reach on their campuses. They don't seem to be much of a systematic answer, which would seem to be to put the burden on me to say what the systematic answer is, and I just don't know. I head an organization that's fighting this fight all the time. We have taken the tact right now of simply trying to be the documentarians of our age. You'll see out on the table a report that Steve referred to earlier, The Vanishing West. This tracks the disappearance of the Western civilization programs from the early 1960s to about the present. He even understated the degree to which those have vanished away. Another area in which we're now focusing is the sustainability movement. It's been alluded to by several speakers. I have just a moment or two, so let me give you the words of Michael Crow, the president of Arizona State University and one of the really important college presidents in the United States right now. He has a new book out titled Designing the New American University, and he explains what sustainability actually means here. Our universities and colleges must take the lead in bringing sustainability to the status of core aspirational value of the American people on the same level as liberty, justice, and equality. What sustainability involves is a new economic model that goes beyond our Constitution, which does not recognize the natural limits of the earth. This is a post-American, post-Western civilization concept that says our economic system, our political system, and our personal liberty, private property, all of that needs to go in favor of this new utopian ideology. That's what we're fighting right now on college campuses. That's the subject of our latest report on sustainability. I would say that if we're going to win the fight for Western civilization, we've got to win these other fights. That is, take on the illiberal ideologies that right now are just sweeping everything before them in American higher education. So thanks.
When I was doing my doctorate at the University of Maryland in U.S. history, I noticed that my colleagues, my fellow graduate students, all the classes that they had developed and were teaching focused on social inequalities and identity politics, right? So this has kind of been mentioned already. The courses had names like Gender and Race in Latin American Revolutions, and Gender and Science in Colonial America, and Race in blah, 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 right? You get the picture. This is what all the courses looked like. I decided to offer something a little different. So I developed a course that was a political and intellectual history on the conservative movement in 20th century America. And something interesting happened. When registration opened for all of these courses, all those courses languished. They couldn't get 1, 2, even that first day to register. Both sections of my course filled up immediately. I started teaching the class, and students loved it. Even the students that had Obama stickers all over their laptops. They loved the course. And it wasn't because I'm some type of phenomenal teacher. It was because I was offering them an opportunity to engage with ideas that had basically been pushed aside in their education. Ideas that they had sort of been taught not to pay much attention to or reject. And when they had the opportunity to dig into those, they found that, you know what, there's some merit here. Some of these things are interesting. And they begged me at the end of the semester to please reveal my personal opinion on the conservative movement, on conservative thought, and I wouldn't do it. Because this wasn't about indoctrination. It wasn't about them just understanding my political views. It was about education. Them having the chance to dig into a diversity of thought, to have that intellectual freedom, that intellectual liberty. And for me, it was the first taste of what this conference really is about, which is the hunger that's on campuses and the need on campuses for true intellectual diversity, to stand up against the groupthink and to stand up against the campus orthodoxies and have programs that bring real opportunities for real freedom of the mind. And these programs are critical Western civilization programs and many others that contribute to this true marketplace or this arena of ideas. And I want to offer some good news in that from our perspective, they're growing. We see expansion. So in 2008, while I was teaching that class at the University of Maryland, the Charles Koch Foundation was supporting 38 undergraduate programs across the country. Last year, the Koch Foundation supported over 500. That's just 6 years later, this tremendous growth. In 2008, the Koch Foundation supported 6 university-based centers. Right now, there are 32, and most likely by the end of this year, there will be 50. And just to note, 2 of those 32 are actually at Arizona State University, where Michael Crow has insisted on there being this type of intellectual diversity on his campus. And so there's the Center for Political Thought and Leadership, directed by Don Critchlow, and now the Center for Economic Liberty. So it's exciting to see this growth. It's exciting to see that there are students that are hungry for this diversity. It's exciting to see that there are academics that want to provide it. So then the question is, what can we do? Right? How can we help them? How can we help them to grow these programs? And I'd say that ultimately, it's all about the scholars and the professors, right? These professors, they have to be the ones to build the programs. But there are some things that all of us can do, and I want to highlight just at least 2 things. One is that they have to have the freedom to pursue these programs. And the second is that they have to have the funding, as has been noticed, to do that. So I have to confess, in my background, I was a preacher. I cannot help but alliterate. I have 2 F's there, freedom and funding. So let's talk about freedom for a moment. Academic freedom is absolutely critical, right? Professors have to have the support of their colleagues, of the administration, and of the students to dig into controversial questions, to dissent in thought. Right? That means that there cannot be trigger warnings or speech codes or allegations of microaggressions or all these other forms of harassment against professors. 2 weeks ago, I had an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal that you may have seen where I described what some of these forms of harassment look like today. There are political interests that are bringing Washington-style political campaign tactics to campuses to silence professors. They're using open records requests to get documents so they can weaponize them and they can intimidate these people and shut them up because they don't agree with them. And that has to stop. And it's on us to play a role in stopping it. If you have influence on a university, if you have a relationship with a university, you should be pressing them to provide academic freedom to their scholars. I would say as a model, look to the University of Chicago. They just adopted the Chicago Principles, and some other universities I think are doing so as well, including Purdue. These are principles of academic freedom. It is a way to get a university to put on paper that they are committed to the freedom of thought, to freedom for intellectual diversity. I would also encourage you to rally faculty, fellow faculty or faculty on campuses, to work together, to build networks that support one another in academic freedom. Get campus student organizations involved. Students are very passionate about free speech. They're very passionate about these issues. You can get them involved. You can publish statements in school newspapers and other things. There are lots of things that can be done. I would actually encourage you to talk with my colleague Adam Kissel, who's here, who's very involved in this space, and speak with him about some of these ways that we can all take part in really bolstering academic freedom on campuses. So that's number one, the first F, freedom. The second being funding. If you are a professor or scholar, let me give you 4 things that you can do. Number 1 is reach out to donors, talk to foundations, be bold, be aggressive, share with them your vision, your dreams, the legacy that you want to leave with students. I mentioned the ASU Center for Political Thought and Leadership. That began when Don Critchlow and I were sitting on the patio at his home. And I said, Don, what do you want to do? What's the impact you want to have? He described the Center for Political Thought and Leadership. I said, great, that's exciting. And then in 2014 it launched, and he's having a tremendous, tremendous impact on students. So reach out to donors, talk to foundations. Number 2, encourage innovation and entrepreneurial thought. Now, I realize that universities are by no means places of great flexibility, but we've got to push them to be that, right? Experiment with new types of programs. If a program doesn't work, shut it down. Stop doing it. Try something else. If it does work, scale it up and communicate with donors about that, because they get excited. We all get excited, right? To see an academic being creative and trying things, and when they work, doing them, and when they don't, stopping. The third thing, measure impact, not just activity. Right? It's not about how many people you gather in a room. If we think about the success of this event, it is not the number of people that are in here right now. It's what we do afterwards. Right? And that requires creativity in identifying proxies for measuring impact, for understanding that did you change the way a student considers an issue? Was there a real difference made there? So if a student comes to a speaking event and then enrolls in a class on that subject, that's a key, right? That you've made a difference in the way they're thinking about something. That's the third. The fourth is, I would say, have an impact beyond the ivory tower. It is obviously critical to educate students in the classroom. It is critical to conduct research that is going to move forward academic narratives, but it is also critical to reach out to the community, to broaden access to ideas to the citizenry. And that requires being creative as well. That requires doing op-eds, radio shows, speaking at Rotary clubs, all types of things. And if you're not a faculty member or a professor, those are all things that we can encourage professors to do if you have a relationship with them. I would also say other things that you can do is talk to the senior administrators at universities. Ask them, what are they doing to encourage true intellectual diversity? Now, it's been noted, they'll talk about diversity till they're blue in the face. But what about intellectual diversity? Who are the professors on their campuses that are doing interesting things? Talk with those professors. Get to know them. And I would also encourage you to talk to us at the Charles Koch Foundation. We would be more than happy to speak with you about the programs we support, about the scholars that we know of that are interested in doing exciting things like what we're talking about today. And we'd love to talk with you more about that, because that opens doors for collaboration. That opens doors for a disproportionate impact on students and on citizens in education. So just 2 things. 1, be encouraged. There is progress. There are students that are hungry. There are faculty and administrators that want to make a difference. And number 2, we must step forward to ensure that scholars have the freedom and the funding to be successful. Thank you for the opportunity to have this discussion. This is really exciting. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
John introduced a course that got great enrollment. I've taught the same course for 51 consecutive years. the same way. I don't even use PowerPoint. What is it? It's a course in the economic history of the United States. It's a story it is the story of how we went from being a poor country to becoming a rich country. How we came to becoming the greatest economic power in the world. What are my enrollments? Well, let's put it this way. I have an admission committee of former students to decide who can get in. I turn kids away by the droves. Picking up on John's point, kids are hungry for this stuff. They don't want more courses on later 19th century lesbian writers on Nicaragua, something or other. They want courses that tell the story of our greatness. Now let me go to my real remarks. Aside from introducing such transformative concepts as democracy, the rule of law, and mass literacy to the human condition, Western civilization has brought enormous expansion of the ability of people to live long, relatively prosperous lives with a great deal of leisure. Thomas Hobbes, writing long before the Industrial Revolution, said that life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Whereas today, precisely the opposite is true in those parts of the world where Western civilization has reigned supreme. The export of some of the central ideas emanating from the Enlightenment from such minds as Hobbes, John Locke, Adam Smith, and others to non-Western locales has expanded some of the tangible economic fruits of Western civilization to literally billions of other people. Yet university curricula downplay the importance of teaching Americans the towering achievements of our civilizations. Why? A lot of it's been mentioned already. The anti-Western moral and cultural relativism of leftist academics who usually dominate the curricular discussion has contributed to this. But there are indeed two other reasons that I will mention today to add to our discussion. The first relates to the changing tastes of customers of higher education. Polling shows that students predominantly look at college these days as a ticket to leading a comfortable middle-class life, and that for most, that means pursuing a course of instruction emphasizing practical training of a vocational nature. In 1970, for every 100 students receiving bachelor's degrees in business, there were almost the same number for every 100. There were 94 students majoring in English or history. By 1990, that had fallen from 94 to 28. Today it is 24. In 2012-13, there were 66% fewer history majors graduating with bachelor's degrees than 43 years earlier. Now, many of us try to sell the study of Western civilization by emphasizing the non-pecuniary pleasures associated with studying such subjects as history, philosophy, or literature. But that hasn't worked. And I think we need to emphasize maybe a little more some empirical evidence, which is very encouraging, that shows that students who major in core subjects in the humanities often do as well or better than those majoring in very vocationally oriented subjects. Looking at data from payscale.com, I examined the beginning career and mid-career earnings for 6 majors. 3 of them subjects that provide instruction that's sort of at the core subjects of studying Western civilization: history, philosophy, and English literature. And then I looked at 3 other vocationally specific majors: business administration, marketing, and communications. The early career salaries of the humanities majors was modestly over $40,000, only slightly below the averages of the vocational majors, which range from $41,000 to $45,000. In general, the vocational majors made about 6% more early career salaries. But salary advancement was greater among the humanities majors over the career. By mid-career, philosophy majors were earning well over double their beginning career salaries, whereas for business administration majors, the increase was only 60%. At the beginning of the career, business administration majors made 11% more than philosophy majors, but by mid-career, the philosophy majors earned 15% more than the business administration ones. Similarly, history majors earned a bit less than communications majors initially, but a bit more by mid-career. At the beginning, business administration majors made this is West Virginia PowerPoint figures. At the beginning of a career, business administration majors made $5,000 more annually than English literature majors, but by mid-career, the earnings of the lit majors exceeded the business majors by $3,400 a year. So much of the human capital that we accumulate in life is learned on the job. And those majoring in the humanities master the on-the-job learning on average better than those who study vocational subjects. This is consistent with the findings of Arum and Rokesky in Academically Adrift, that critical thinking and writing skills advance more among students majoring in traditional disciplines than those majoring in the vocational subjects, such as business administration. Now, I used a second empirical approach to look at lifetime employment experiences. I compared the earnings of 10 students at prestigious traditional liberal arts colleges with the earnings of those 10 equally prestigious larger universities. I assumed that the liberal arts colleges students were a little bit more likely to take a larger percentage of their courses relating to the evolution of Western civilization than at the larger universities, if for no other reason that the larger universities typically had schools specializing in business, communications, education, engineering, and a myriad of other vocationally oriented subjects. Again, the results were remarkably similar to before. The larger institutions were with more vocational emphasis, graduated students whose early career earnings were 19% above those at the liberal arts colleges. By mid-career, however, the median income earnings of the liberal arts college graduates exceeded those who attended the larger universities. Same conclusion. I can give you more statistics on this, but my timer here is telling me I only have 2 minutes left, although I'll remind you I have tenure. So I'll talk as long as I damn well please. By the way, the only attempt on my part to have all my emails and all harassment on me for something I've written came from the state of Texas. I will say this, from here in Austin. Someone in Austin once didn't like something I wrote, so you people down here play kind of dirty, I think. There's a second reason for the decline of the market share of traditional majors that emphasizes Western civilization in their courses. In the crudest way of putting it, on average, college graduates today are far dumber than their predecessors of 2 generations ago. In part, that's because of the decline in the quality of primary and secondary education, but it is in part because the College for All movement has meant that many attending colleges lack not only the academic prerequisites needed for serious advanced study, but often lack the cognitive endowments necessary for truly higher education. For graduates of mediocre high schools who ranked in the middle of their graduating class, the study of, say, philosophy is abstruse and boring and difficult, particularly when you can take a whole variety of fluff courses and get higher grades for less work. And the rise of ahistorical thinking is particularly troublesome. People are ignorant of the past, how Western economic, intellectual, and yes, moral exceptionalism rose with the expansion of personal liberty. Of course, change needs to come. We should raise academic standards. We should end grade inflation. We should have far fewer federal dollars supporting academic mediocrity, with third-party support based more on academic promise or past achievement. We need for organizations like the Koch Foundation to continue to expand programs extolling the virtues of the civilization of which we're blessed to be a part of. A little bribery is in order. Students will study history and philosophy and Western civilization if we pay them to do so. We need to reduce the subsidization of academic fluff and increase the subsidization of academic rigor and an acquaintance with the ideas, the personalities, and the events that made ours the greatest society the world has ever known. Thank you.
Hello, it's great to be here. So I thank the Texas Public Policy Foundation and the Texas Tech Institute for the Study of Western Civilization. Steve and Tom, thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. And also it's a pleasure to share the podium with friends and fantastic scholars and both at the same time. So that's great. Well, what I'm going to do is to share with you two things. One is a little bit about what the Freedom Center is, right? So you have a little bit of context about what we're talking about. And the second thing is that what can be learned about the Freedom Center experience that could be valuable if we want to expand similar efforts in other parts, on other universities, right? Now, to begin with, let's see, yeah, there you go, all right. This is, of course, an endeavor, and other panelists have alluded to that is academically inspired and question-driven. And that is very important for one of the first lessons we'd like to share later in the talk, which is the importance of the narrative that we are advancing and why that is crucial. So it is, of course, question-driven, as I'm saying, and these questions are very important, right? What are the fundamental elements of freedom? What does it mean to be free in different dimensions, politically, psychologically, morally, economically, metaphysically? How does freedom contribute to collective action issues that are important, individual well-being? What might free people aspire to become? It's a question it's a very deep question. It goes well beyond material prosperity, right? But of course, does freedom contribute to prosperity? What is moral responsibility? And why does it matter? And finally, what societal institutions and practices most often lead to healthy, productive, ethical, thriving communities? Well, these questions are behind the Freedom Center efforts, right? The Freedom Center is a research center within the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences at the University of Arizona. It was established in 2008 by Kendrick Professor David Schmitz, a philosopher, a very renowned philosopher. And just to brag a little bit, to give you a sense of how well this project has worked there, the University of Arizona is currently ranked #1, peer-ranked, #1 graduate program for political philosophy in the world by the Professional Definite Rating Guide, which is peer-reviewed. I mean, it's philosophers from all over the place, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Oxford, get together and decide who's the best program there. And there is the University of Arizona is #1 in the world. Now, this is due, of course, a fantastic faculty at the University of Arizona, but in no small part is also due to the work done at the Freedom Center. Now, what is our mission? And this is starting with the narrative, right? The narrative has to be clear and tight. The center for the philosophy of freedom is a community of scholars, like alluding to someone that John said, like it's driven by professors and scholars, right? Dedicated to promoting an understanding of the nature, history, and value of freedom and responsibility, as well as their contribution to personal flourishing and social prosperity. So it's short, tight, and it's a clear message. That's what we do. Now, what we do, we have three strategies to pursue that, right? Number one is undergraduate education. It is true, there is a hunger for this at our universities, and there's not enough being done to satisfy that demand. So the idea there, the objective is to produce college graduates who are better public, private, and corporate citizens that understand what it means to create value in a society and what it means to be responsible for one's choices and their consequences. Now also, we have a second strategy, which is graduate training. And the objective there is clear. We have the best grad students in the world, and the idea is to produce better college teachers and better scholars. They are at the front line of what students now explore and offer courses like the ones we were discussing in this panel and the previous panel, and that's crucial. And finally, published research. So the idea there is to write the books and articles from which this great new generation of college professors will teach. So the materials, what is going to be offered in the classroom. So that's the mission right there. Now, that's where we are. And I had a long conversation with Dave Schmitz, which he is the one that started this project in 2008. And I said, well, Dave, I'm going to share this with an audience of very well-educated people that want to make a contribution and want to take a stand and do something to turn what is happening nowadays in American universities, in American society. So what could we say about that? So I want to share four things, right? Four things. First, the importance of the narrative, right? It is always about the ideas. Like, we believe that for these efforts to be successful, it had to be grounded on the ideas. And these are separate. There are four things for the sake of the presentation, but it really are intertwined, right? This also alludes to the fact that for this to be a long-lasting legacy, it has to be grounded on ideas. It cannot be grounded on individuals, right? Because we'll be gone at some point, and we want this to go on for a long period of time. And this narrative is crucial, and part of this narrative requires to be brave. And that's why we say, like, never apologize for standing up for freedom. It's going to be tempting along the way to concede some ground and step back, maybe for strategic reasons, but never at the expense of giving up the ideas we're fighting for. So more than an apology, what is needed for freedom is a great defense. Bastiat used to say that the worst thing that can happen to an idea is not to be skillfully attacked, but to be ineptly defended. So more than apologizing for freedom, what we need is to craft those tight arguments and reasoning. And at the center is academic excellence as a core value. We have to be better than the others, right? Like, so this is an intellectual conversation. Professor George yesterday was saying that, and he was fantastic about crafting that narrative. He said, like, I have to be better than my opponent, right? If somebody is advancing an argument against freedom or favoring state intervention, I have to be better. And academic excellence is a core value in this narrative. So that will be the first one. The second one is that social capital within the discipline or within the department or within the university is crucial, right? David Schmidt was already a respected member of the philosophy department when he started this, right? Others that have started these similar programs have long, very productive and recognized careers in the academia, right? And that gives social capital, that gives credibility, right? It's not something that can be produced out of the blue and without a lot of effort and time on the part of those starting this effort. So that social capital within the discipline and department gives credibility and is crucial. Number 3, funding is very important, but it's not enough, right? And we are grateful for the support of our donors. Some of them are here today, and we are very grateful for that. But it's not enough. Those are the means, right, to do something. And they enable us to educate more grad students. They enable us to offer programs. They enable us to write books. They enable us to explore uncharted territory, right? Like, for example, right now, we are starting a very interesting program that is called Ethics, the Economy, and Entrepreneurship, which is a high school course written by the University of Arizona scholars that presents a more complete narrative that goes beyond purely economic concepts and touches on ethics and entrepreneurship. And this course is going to be, we're in the process of training teachers on the materials so they can teach it at our high schools. And if the students want, they could take this course for credits. Of course, that requires financial support, but it goes well beyond that, and that's not the only constraint for this effort. So being aware of that is important. And finally, it is a long journey. Like, this is a long walk. And that's why it is important to understand the long-lasting legacy and the importance of the narrative. Allies are needed in this journey. And often allies can be administrators, fellow faculty members. Students can be fantastic allies, right? But a deep understanding that we do not win by making other people lose. It's very important, right? That part of the efforts, that the idea that this is a team effort where we need much more than ourselves is crucial. So I will stop right there, but I'd be happy to take questions later if that is possible. Tom? All right.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists. Fortunately, we have some time for questions. So if you have a question, we have a microphone right here, so please walk over to the microphone. I'd like to begin with a question for our 4 panelists. In the last couple of weeks, we have seen criticisms of political correctness on campus coming not from the right, but from the left. Laura Kipnis at Northwestern, a feminist professor, is currently being intimidated by students and receiving the usual support from administration, which means none. Another professor writing in the left-wing website, Vox.com, wrote an article titled, "I'm a liberal professor and my liberal students terrify me." Now, the name of the professor, Edward Slosher, but that's a pseudonym because he had to take a false name in order to prevent the very retaliation about which he was writing. So my question for you 4 is, does this suggest that there may be a turnaround coming?
The law of diminishing returns is at work. The left has become so outrageous in their attacks, and it's just gotten beyond the pale that, and they're running out of people. You know, they picked on everyone. There's hardly anyone left to pick on, so now they have to pick on themselves. I think it's really true. Those on the left are picking on others on the left who are sort of moderately on the left, who are sort of middle, who are, voted for Obama but did so peacefully. So I think, it's like the French Revolution ultimately reached excesses, and there was revulsion and change, and maybe, possibly the same thing is coming here.
Professor Wood?
Yeah, the unknown fellow calling himself Edward on Vox.com writes that the tactics being used against him would be perfectly legitimate used against conservatives. He's just upset that they're being used against him. Laura Kipnis was a Title IX harpy who wanted to turn these techniques of denial of due process and summary judgment against students and colleagues all the time until it happened to her. So these are not our allies. This is a internecine fight on the left. I can take some pleasure in watching the revolution devour some of its own, but it's not really an answer to the problem.
I believe it's changing. I don't know if it's how big and how lasting and the change is, but I remember like in 2004 when I was at Claremont, graduate university, getting my degree. I remember going to Scripps College to give a talk about why affirmative action was a bad deal for Hispanics. And I had to be escorted out by security out of the college. I was like deemed as a traitor, so loud, whatever. I'm like, Mario Villarreal, he's come here to support Hispanics. Yes, that's why I'm saying that affirmative action is a bad deal for you guys. They didn't like it. I did a similar talk recently, and it was better received, right? And maybe the reason was because in the panel was other people was talking in favor of affirmative action. So the openness to the debate may be part of what is driving that change, if that makes sense.
Yes. Thank you. Go
Yeah, I
ahead.
was just say I don't know if it's changing, but I think there is a tremendous opportunity, and I think at the Koch Foundation we're very excited about that opportunity because we've seen these attacks for a while. We now see that faculty are getting a little uncomfortable at some of these schools because they see that the universities aren't stepping up to support another person that's been attacked, and think, wait a minute, this could blow back on me. And so we're excited that this is a real opportunity to hopefully build some momentum around academic freedom. You see what the University of Chicago has done, some other universities adopting those principles. We see some organizations sort of stepping into the fray as well. So I think we're really encouraged by it.
Well, I think we all are hopeful. At the same time, I know others following the reasoning of Oswald Spengler, who over a century ago wrote a book called The Decline of the West, and there he borrows a line from Hegel in which he says, the owl of Minerva begins her flight at dusk. Owl of Minerva stands for wisdom, dusk stands for cultural decline, and his point was that wisdom only arises on the ashes of a civilization. In the hope that that is not the case, we are holding this meeting. Mark, you have a question.
Yeah, thanks, Tom, and the panel for putting on such a great presentation. Most of the people in this room are college graduates. Some of us are donors to our alma maters, and I think probably all of us receive frequent solicitations for money. What can alumni do to influence what's going on in their college, most of which do not have the kinds of programs that we all would like to see more of, and some of which are very actively involved in suppressing such programs?
I know, I'm happy. Yeah, it's a great question. So I think what's important is to, when a university is coming to solicit, or when you're having those conversations with a university, as I was suggesting earlier, is to push really deep on what are the programs that they have in place that do talk about these kinds of ideas? Or is there even just one professor who does that? And then talk with that person, with that professor, and learn more about what they're doing. So don't allow the university to sort of just paint in broad strokes. We're all about diversity, we're all about this, we're all about that. But get to know the folks that are on the ground that they would point towards as sort of hallmarks of the things that you're excited about. And then have those conversations with them about ways that you might be able to support what they're doing directly. And then I'd be happy to talk. I have a lot more that I could share on that I'd be happy to talk about.
No one in their right mind should give money to universities point blank. Write a check to university. That is the absolute, and you probably, some of you do, and I don't mean to insult your intelligence. Don't do it again. It is absolutely a mistake for 100 different reasons. And so earmark your donations for what it is you stand for, what you want. Make challenge grants. I'll give $1 or $1 million if you can find someone else who'll put up 2 or 3 million more, because development offices sometimes will rise to that bait because they want to increase their thing. So partner with others in doing that. Find others who think like-minded like you, and 2 or 3 of you go together to the development office. Don't go separately. Go together, because the universities will take your money and subvert it and whatnot. And if you do give money to a university, get a good lawyer, a good someone to sit down. Bob can tell you, all of you can tell this, the horror stories that go with donor intent being violated. It is absolutely criminal what goes on in universities, where they think the money, the minute they get it, it's theirs, and they don't have to pay a damn bit of attention what the donor said. And if there are ways you can deal with that, and you need to, and you need a good lawyer to do that.
If I may add real quick. Targeted giving is of course the way to go. But targeted means to establish a relationship, know a little bit more, and learn about what is going on in your university. But the other way to do it is there are not a lot, but there are some organizations that have developed a lot of know-how about how to do events at colleges and universities that explore the ideas of liberty and individual responsibility, limited government. One of them, I used to work there until very recently, the Institute for Humane Studies. I'm like, you may choose to give your gifts and money to those places like the Institute for Humane Studies that then will carry out events at your university, support professors, the students with the scholarships, mentoring, programs, etc., etc. That might be another way to do it.
I can add a few details to this. If you're giving in an earmarked way to a university, one channel is called a donor-advised fund. Be sure you know who is advising the donor-advised fund. It's usually a cutout that will be someone who represents views you don't agree with. If you're making in-kind donations, such as artworks to a university, see a lawyer first. Be absolutely sure you know where that artwork is going to end up. Most of them end up in auctions. Sometimes they get relegated to a basement in hopes of drawing out other donations from the same person, but that's a real sinkhole in university donations. I would say in general, never give anything to a university unless you've actually seen and met the people who are going to be benefiting from that money. The experts in the development offices of universities can razzle-dazzle you any which way and make you think that they're on your side. They're not. They are not on your side. They are there to develop the interests of the university, and even the mission statements of university now are just dead set against anybody who has conservative values. The playfulness, to use the nicest term for this, is rampant, and you've got to be on your guard. Yes, you love your alma mater and want to support it, but you've got to be really shrewd about how you do that.
Those are all very helpful comments, to which I would only add, having worked in university administration, I learned that development offices in universities, they have 3 types of donations you can make. One, unrestricted, which they would like, and then there's restricted at the other end, and in between is designated. So if you say, well, I only want to support Professor Villarreal's program, they'll say, fine, it'll go to that. But under designated, the money that you give will be taken from him that was originally planned and given somewhere else. So insist on restricted only. And before you do that, unless you are have been blessed and your alma mater is either Hillsdale or the University of Dallas, contact your alma mater and ask them, do you require the study of Western civilization of all students regardless of major? And if they say no, then say, get back to me when you do, right? But if they say yes, be even more on your guard. Say, show me the syllabus, show me the course content. Right? Good. Yes, Bill.
In Professor Vedder's presentation, he talked about students thirsting for knowledge in courses like the economic history of the United States. And yet there is a radicalized set of students who do things like ban the display of the American flag at the University of California, Santa Cruz. My first question is, what is your general feeling about the breakdown of the population percentage-wise into those two groups of students? And my second question is, what is the effect that the fire organization has had in bringing some constitutional sanity to free speech codes on campuses?
Well, I guess I'll start because it was addressed to me. I don't know. The proportion of students in various categories with regards to radicalization varies dramatically from campus to campus. Seeing Hillsdale College, it represented the audience. I mean, if you go to Hillsdale College, the big fight there is, are you a libertarian or are you a conservative? If, however, you're talking about the University of California at Santa Cruz, you can put all the conservatives in a phone booth if you can find one anymore. That's probably a bit of a misstatement. There's an enormous amount of variation. I do think students, we publicize a lot these incidents about radicals, and there are a lot of them to be publicized, and it is a big problem. Peter is absolutely right. But I don't know that they are always, to assume they're the majority, I think is a mistake on most campuses. On a typical campus, the students might have a mildly leftist center orientation, but most of the students I know are not all that political anymore. They're interested in other things. They're interested in getting their degree and getting a job, of some sort. So it varies a lot from school to school. Go.
Well, on that breakdown, I would say nationally it's something about 25% of the students are progressive, on the left, self-consciously activist. About another 60% or so consider themselves as either apolitical, and they're sort of vaguely libertarian. They want to be left alone. The minority of students who are activists have a huge footprint. They affect the attitudes of everybody else. So they're vocal enough, organized enough, and energetic enough that they can carry weight in campus debates far beyond their numbers. Number of actual conservatives in higher education, minimal. A number of people who consider themselves committed libertarians, somewhere around 10%. And that's the spectrum nationally. I've been doing some work on that. As to the effect of fire is an absolutely indispensable organization. It wins every fight it gets into, but it loses the war. And the problem there, of course, is that the people who have their speech codes squashed here are like whack-a-moles. They just pop up over there, they wait till fire to go away, and they try it again. And it's just an endlessly repeating cycle. It's necessary, but it's not a battle that we're going to win once and for all in the short term.
There are some very interesting studies on the line of what Professor Wood was mentioning. That from all people, some of them coming from the Pew Center, where they ask first the students to identify themselves ideologically. So I consider myself a conservative, I consider myself a libertarian, and then there is a set of questions that they have to answer. Do you think the government should do anything in their power to protect the environment? Agree or disagree? Like those type of questions: religion, environment, gay marriage, the military, government spending, subsidies, regulation. And it turns out that a lot of them say that they are one thing and they are not. And it turns out that a lot of them are much more sympathetic to free markets, civil liberties, right? Which is an entry door. That's why it's so important to start those conversations in the college, because they are eager to hear those ideas, and suddenly they're going to realize, this sounds something like sounds right. It makes sense. That will be one thing. The other thing is that the sum of the small things may not be small. And we may not have big numbers, but if we empower them and enable them to have a disproportionate influence, and they are very vocal, they're very passionate, like that might be also a way for change in the way we would like to see it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to try to squeeze in our last two questioners here. Go ahead, Tony.
Surveying the broader landscape of higher education, it comes as a surprise to no one in this room that it's in a gigantic bubble right now. Eventually, that bubble is going to burst, and when that happens, there could be a vacuum in where we have entrenched academia today. can we, in the event that the bubble bursts and a vacuum emerges on a lot of these campuses, can we move in opportunistically at that point and basically pounce on them to get real reform done? And in that case, what needs to be done in the short to medium term?
Well, I've written a lot on this. I do think there's going to be big changes coming in the next 20 years. Whether that's how you describe that, we don't know exactly what form that's going to take. It could mean the elite residential schools are going to remain. The University of Texas is going to remain, if for no other reason. It's got $20 billion in endowment. They got to do something with the money. So the residential schools are mostly going to, the elite ones are going to remain. A lot of the others, though, are in trouble. And a lot of them are really, I mean, Sweetbriar, very prominent, wealthy college, is closing its doors, just closed its doors. So it is true that opens opportunities. And it may be that I think the day has come where we need more Hillsdale-type colleges. I think there's a market out there for them. And I think some of these schools that are starting to go broke, someone ought to come in and say, we'll take you over, but we're going to put in our curriculum and so forth. I think there's some opportunities there.
Thank you, sir.
I wanted to just mention the National Association of Scholars. I'm a member of that group. I taught at Texas A&M for 24 years. And while I was on the faculty senate, this is just to play off some of the things that have been said, they passed an early multiculturalism part of the core curriculum, and I'd taken the opportunity to run for faculty senate just because I knew there would be that kind of malarkey coming along, and I wanted to be able to be there to be opposed to it. And in engineering, it's easy to get elected if you're conservative, right? Most engineers are pretty sensible kind of people. But not to say that other people aren't, but we had an opportunity there which worked out really well. The Alumni Association is often much more conservative than the university is. And I think we were able, when they actually passed the bill in the faculty senate to have multiculturalism, which had required courses you could choose from a list of about 4, and it was like radical feminism, it was gay, lesbian stuff. It had nothing to do with China or India or I could have been for a legitimate multiculturalism course, but it wasn't that. And so we were able to put out through the network, and today that's easy with internet, and the university got probably 1,000 calls within 2 days saying, we'll never give another penny to your school if you approve this for your core curriculum. And they went, either the regents told the president or the president read the writing on the wall and said, they just canned it. The faculty senate at most schools is advisory. It ultimately doesn't have the decision-making power, I think, at least at the universities I've worked at. And so I think a lot of times when we're talking about alums not giving money, that's one thing you can do. But the other thing is if we can somehow network and get people to do that. But I think the National Association of Scholars could potentially also help encourage their members. The materials you put out are extremely helpful in terms of what the battle's about, but in terms of strategic things they can do outside of just trying to be a good foot soldier in their department can make a big difference.
Well, we're a membership organization with about 3,000 members, and
yeah.
We're more concentrated in some states than the others. There has to be a kind of critical mass of faculty members to accomplish something.
Well, it doesn't take many to contact the alums, though. Okay, there were only a few of us that did that, and if the alums get all angry, then they can make a big difference. Money speaks, and I think most universities can be bought one way or the other.
Let me just close by saying that I mentioned at our breakfast this morning that it's hard to imagine, given the state of our country today, an issue more important than the one that we're discussing here this morning. Ronald Reagan said that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. Where do universities fit in this? George Will answered in the negative shortly after 9/11 when he said, we cannot defend what we cannot define. Right? This meeting, which seeks to restore the study of Western civilization, hopes to enable the next generation, again, to define what Western civilization is, and thus who they are. And I want to thank you all for being part of the fight. Thank you.